All right. Thank you and for watching. Welcome back to another episode of the Collecting the Precious podcast. Jim and I are here once again. And as you can see, we have a very, very special guest, Sir Richard Taylor, co-founder of Weta Workshop, here to talk to us about 20 years of making collectibles representing the wonderful characters of Tolkien's Middle-earth based on Peter Jackson's amazing best of all time trilogy. I will fight you if you say differently, internet. Richard, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and talk. It's obviously it's been 20 years is crazy how quickly it's flown by. And just the development and all that we've seen in the years of the collectibles. What's been the biggest change in 20 years of doing collectibles for Weta Workshop, for what you guys do?
Well, firstly, let me just say hi to the two of you. It's lovely to catch up. And Jim, really amazing to meet you in person. Obviously, have known you by reputation for a while now, and it's nice to get a chance to talk to you. I don't believe we've ever caught up in person. I hope that day arrives one day. And obviously, it's lovely to say hi to all of the people listening, many of who I do know personally and have just hung out with at Comic-Con. We were very fortunate to be guests at the One Ring party, which was so kick-ass and so cool and so much fun. And yeah, it was just so, after 3 or 4 years away from Comic-Con, it was so amazing to be back with everyone. And let me just also say thank you to the people that attended our panel. We were a little concerned about getting a large room because we were a bit concerned that people might have heard it all before and not want to come. And, it's like being a 15-year-old and throwing your first party at your home and worrying that the school kids won't turn up. It always feels a bit like that. But, the fact that the room was packed and there were sadly people waiting outside that didn't get in, suggested that we probably could have been a bit bolder about the size of the room that we got. And but it was lovely being there with Lawrence and Gino and Dan and having a chance, and then obviously with Jed doing such an incredible job too. Just so wonderful. So that felt very, very special. And so thanks to everyone who attended. So in answer to your question, a lot actually has changed over the last 20 years. Technically, the biggest change, of course, is the introduction of ZBrush into the world of collectibles. This is a good thing, ultimately. Initially, I was concerned, like many traditionalist sculptors like myself, that ZBrush would struggle to capture the soul of the character, right? Because when you've actually got the physicality of sculpting the material right there in your hands, you can imbue the material. And I guess if you think about historical sculptors like Michelangelo, not for a moment to compare what we're doing to that, but his work, you can see it overtly within every gram of material, even into a marble carving. He can imbue the spirit, the soul of the character that he is trying to represent. Obviously, often religious figures. But irrelevant to the fact that we are working on 6-scale collectibles that are this big, that are going to adorn people's shelves, I've always been of the view that we must treat them as if they are fine art, and try and find the energy, the dynamism, the calmness, the credibility, and the soul of the character. And to varying degrees of success, we've arguably achieved that. And I could understand through the manipulation of physical material that process. And when ZBrush arrived and we were pushing around volumes, and it was all a little bit plastic and smudgy and didn't really have form in the manner that you could sense it through your fingertips, I really struggled to think that we could get there. But of course, that was disingenuous to the extraordinary journey that people wanted to go with ZBrush. And over the years, those early years, I could see that we were starting to find a way to solidify the sculpture, to give it grounding, to give it weight, to make it feel like it lived in the world. And today, it is indiscernible between, let's say, a sculptor such as Jamie Best Warwick, who entirely chooses only to sculpt traditionally, and then another sculptor that may work for us who entirely chooses to sculpt digitally. And the ability now to produce extremely beautiful collectibles in that medium is just a given, as we see all over the world. From a collector perspective, of course, there is now so many companies making collectibles, so there is such a significant amount of choice there for people. The biggest number of collectibles from a single figure that we ever sold, I think, other people on this may know better than me, I think we sold 12,000 Saurons. Today, we would probably find, between 400 and 800 people that are collecting the bigger pieces, and that is a very real challenge to any collectibles business, because it limits the number of things that you can do, and because the collector base is smaller, etc. It does have a benefit, of course, in that your collector base is incredibly discerning and thoughtful and credible around what they want to collect. I myself don't collect figures because I love the movie. I collect figures because I love the sculpture in that figure. Now, there are cases on the walls around me, and as I've done in the past, I've probably done this. I'm surrounded by 240 collectibles in my office.
I need your room.
Yeah, and
wow.
And some of those would challenge my commentary, because they're not imbued with necessarily the sense of what I love to collect, or the reason I love to collect. But most of the ones that I've chosen to purchase and assemble and paint as garage kits, or I've bought as pre-paints, I've bought because they have that extraordinary capability. I'll actually just show you a couple to make sure I'm driving the point home. These two collectibles are two of my favorite, hence why I've got them on the shelf behind me. It's some way, this is from Z-Ram, great B-level Japanese movie that I'm a huge fan of. It's sort of irrelevant that she is a sci-fi kick-ass, space warrior type character holding a giant gun. It's really about the counterposter pose and how classical that piece of anatomy is, irrelevant of the character within it. And
very well done.
Yeah, phenomenally well done. But I'm not even talking about the quality of the surface detail sculpting. I'm talking about the personality within the figure, right? And you can see there, this is arguably my favorite collectible of all time, and it is my I believe this is as close as you could get to a perfectly sublime piece of collectible sculpting. You just know the character that is pulling that pose. So anyway, I probably waffled on long enough in answer to that question, but they're probably the two. Technically, ZBrush and then the incredible explosion of companies that are doing this out in the world.
Well, I think one of the things that we talk about on the message boards, and one of the things for me that's I've always, and I think I mentioned this when we talked with Daniel here a while back, is like when I look at the stuff that you guys do, and obviously that makes up 99% of my collection. One of the things is, does it have the essence of the character? When you look at it, do you feel what you felt when you saw that character? I mean, it's obviously being based on the films, what you felt when you saw that character on screen. I mean, when I look at my Balrog statues, you know, there's the power and awe that I had when I first saw the Balrog come on screen 20 plus years ago now. Do I feel the same about Aragorn when I see him, and that relate to the character and understand it was a man that knew he had to be in charge, but didn't want to be in charge. And that's why ultimately I think he was, you know, would have been a good leader if Tolkien had taken that further and stuff. But yeah, 100%. I think,
yeah,
and I think you guys do a great job with that, because you do feel that character when you see that character, when you see those statues.
It's lovely of you to say that, because that is our primary objective. People will go, oh no, but you're trying to get the costume accurate, and you're trying to get that is a perfunctory process of time, right? Obviously, it requires incredible talent and skill, but if you invest enough time and just work it and work it and work it, you can get the details right, the thicknesses. Materiality is a really important one, especially with a property like Middle-earth. And when you're transferring from, say, an anime world, as we see a lot of collectibles today, into a polystone world, into a physical world, you don't have such a tight reference point on materiality. But when you're going from a Middle-earth world where the costumes and the armor and the weaponry and the jewelry has been so carefully considered at a materiality perspective, it is an insult to that work if we don't capture the same sense. And even if you think about the clothes that you are wearing right now, the difference between a piece of velvet and the way that it drapes versus a piece of polyester or a piece of silk or a piece of etc., etc., etc. So a very challenging task for a sculptor that is joining us as a junior or intermediate sculptor, hoping to one day get good enough to sculpt collectibles, is the ability to communicate the materiality of things. And that's interesting. But what you speak to is the very essence of the challenge, in that, and we ultimately will pause the output of a piece if we feel we haven't achieved it. Now, people listening on this podcast will possibly say, but there are times that you haven't achieved it. That may be the case, but it's not for lack of trying. And we don't release a piece if we don't think that we've achieved it, right? Now, it's very hard to know that you've captured everyone's expectation of a particular emotion that they felt in the moment in the movie. But something that Dan and Jules and I do is discuss in depth what is the essence of the character and what is his or her soul. And that's a really important part. If I just do this for you, if I look at you, sorry I look so tired, but so be it. If I look at you and I look at you passively, now, if I want to show anger, animalistic anger, I bare my teeth, I furrow my brow, I can look very quickly as like an animalistic anger. That's something like a wag or a Balrog or a fell beast might have. But if you want to communicate intellectualized anger, which is far more dangerous and far more malicious than animalistic anger, because it requires an intellectual brain to figure out the strategy of the anger, and rather than a bully that just flares up and immediately goes into an angry pose, there are tiny muscles in the face that only have to have the subtlest of inflection to show malicious intent. The fact that you're intellectualizing the punishment that you're about to. And if I just look at you passively again, and all I'm going to do is move these two muscles. And you can see that even the subtlety of moving those two muscles has told you, as the person standing opposite, that I've gone from passive to malicious intent with the subtlest of facial shift, right? And so when you're sculpting a collectible, and remember you're sculpting something no bigger than your thumb, right, and you're trying to find these infinitesimal muscle inflections, like just the hardening of the mouth from here to here, make all the difference in whether you've captured the intellectual intent of the actor who has only been hired by Peter Jackson because he or she has such extraordinary acting capabilities that they know how to control every single muscle in their face, every single bone in their fingers, every shape in their bodies. You think about Grima Wormtongue. Mm-hmm. He keeps his face almost entirely passive, and most of his performance is in the shoulder girdle and how he lifts the shoulder girdle, and as it reacts to his placement of his head to his body form. So all of these are debated, considered, informed, in an effort to achieve what you kindly have acknowledged.
Yeah, I that's a really that's I love it. That's great. Because body language does tell a lot. Jim, do you
I was curious, Richard, if I assume that there's a spectrum of challenge as you think about portraying different characters in their essence or soul or their inner realities, like you're describing. Are there particular ones that have proven to be easy? And are there others that are really, really challenging?
Yeah, that's an easy one to answer. Liv Tyler is the most difficult person that we sculpt. And that's for two reasons. One, Liv Tyler as an actress, and then Liv Tyler's character as Arwen, is very sublime, right? Other than when, we see her riding with Frodo, racing away from the Black Riders. And at that point, it is high energy, high action. But for the most part, and even when she is in that role, you could imagine a Rohan carrying Frodo away. Would have been high action, sharp angles, jarring attitude, aggression. But she as a person, and this gives her so much of her inner beauty, and she as a character playing Arwen has this languid calm about her, this elven quality, which I find so beautiful when I watch her. And when we met her for the first time, it was just so obvious that this actor was going to be able to be her. Yeah, well, great. Well, that's Jane's beautiful statue. It's so thrilling that you have that. And what Jane tried to capture in that is that even in that moment of complete threat and death, the risk of death and the risk of horrific consequences to the world of Middle Earth and the people of good in the world of Middle Earth, Arwen still is sublime. She still is utterly in control. She still is entirely at one with her mindset, right? I said there were two things. The second thing is she's an extraordinarily beautiful person, right? She looks beautiful. She exudes this beauty, this inner beauty as a human being. And therefore, you are trying to find that in the sculpt. And we have just done a new Arwen. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about her or not, whether it's a surprise. You may know better than I do.
You can talk about it. Go ahead. We don't mind
Okay.
surprises around here.
Okay. I think we have resculpted her face 5 or 6 times. Resculpting it, casting it, painting it, placing it back on the head, and that may not sound that challenging to you, but the challenge with that figure is her hair is integrated into her body and her headdress is integrated into her hair. So it's not as easy as just making another.
Right.
But and that has elongated the completion of the sculpture by 6 months. Obviously, there is a financial reality to that as well, as that it's added untold to the cost of prototyping, which is a reality. But we won't give up till we feel that we have done the best that we can possibly do. Now, is that best as perfect as everyone would like it to be? We obviously always hope so. It may not be, but that's not for lack of us trying to make it as perfect as what we can possibly make it. And so the place a piece gets to before we mold is a conclusion amongst us all that we have run out of skill, artistry, capability to take it any further than what we've taken it, because we've given it everything we can possibly give it. And the sculpture that we're doing of Arwen, an incredible piece sculpted by Brigitte Woost, is so sublime and so capturing of her controlled passivity, of her inner gentleness, her royal qualities that you could see in the Queen of England all the way up to the 4 days before she passed. The Queen Elizabeth had that quality in her. And you're trying to find that in a collectible that's this tall. I would argue that this has it. Other pieces around me have it. I'd like to think that Jane caught it so beautifully in that piece you just held up, Jim. So yeah, that's the hardest. What's the easiest? The easiest is extreme bad, right? Extreme good is really hard to capture because actors that are playing extreme good, and I would say that Elijah Wood, if you watch Elijah Wood's performance, he actually keeps his face quite not static, but very controlled through the full length of the movies. And he has immense control around the subtle inflection in his muscles in his face that tell you everything without him needing to tell you much, right? He does it. He's not a TV soap actor that's like doing this all the time, right? He operates with such beautiful subtlety. The really bad characters can be far more overt. If you think about Lurtz, he's all about power and aggression and anger and communicating intellectualized malicious intent. And then you get something like the Balrog, which Jamie Bess-Warwick sculpts so incredibly beautifully. The Cave Troll is another great example. this isn't to take anything away from how challenging it is to get that right, but these are bold, sort of extroverted performance moments.
Right.
And we can find those quicker. Jamie knows them so intuitively. He sculpted the original maquette that was chosen by Peter. He then sculpted the scannable maquette, which is as tall as me. He then sculpted the first cave troll collectible. He then sculpted the second, so he lives and breathes that character. You could even argue that he is the mother and father of that character because he birthed that character out of his artistic capability into the plasticine, ultimately then with the genius of the digital guys who then took it onto the screen.
Do you think that's the easy and the hard part with that is with the hard part being, obviously you're talking about Liv Tyler and stuff. Do you think it's because, obviously a lot of times you have like her or Viggo Mortensen, they're playing good guy characters, they're humans, so you have that, whereas like you were talking about with Lurtz and the cave troll and the Balrog, because they're creatures, there's a little bit, it's easier to do that because you're having to take a human character and recreate and get that essence and all the way you talked about in a human statue versus like say Lurtz, who's obviously, I know it's obviously a human being for people watching in a suit. I understand that, but you're talking.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because you would naturally think that the latest Lurtz that we've just done,
the classic series, right? Yeah,
for the classic series, that took an amazingly long length of time to get that right.
Okay.
And it went through more than one sculptor. It went to one of the most talented sculptors in New Zealand who works with us as a freelancer, went right through Lord of the Rings with us, Michael Eskew.
Okay.
And because the same challenge that the actor arguably has, which is I've chosen to be an actor, and the ultimate role for me is to be standing in my underwear on the stage, right? Because I'm not swaddled in costume. If you, that's a silly way to say it, but if you bear with me, you'll see what I'm on about. An actor arguably wants to project all of themselves, and everything that you add on to them at some level reduces their ability to show all of themselves to the world through their performance. And then we come along and slap a huge piece of silicone or rubber on their face, right? And you swaddle them in rubber. And through that rubber, they have to perform. They have to bring the nuance, control of their capability and realize it through a thickness of material, silicone or rubber. Lawrence, of course, had an unbelievable capability of achieving that, as does Jed Brophy, right? Jed Brophy is incredible at transferring. Like if Jed were to do this without any prosthetics, he knows so instinctively that to get the same level of intent, he has to overperform it and drive the prosthetic because he has done it for so much of his life.
Right.
In answer to your question, the same challenge happens to be in the sculpting of a collectible, because if you just sculpt the prosthetic, the outside surface of the prosthetic, you will get it to look like Lurtz, but you won't get it to look like Lawrence wearing Lurtz. Right? Lurtz is not Lurtz. Lurtz is Lurtz being worn by Lawrence. So you have to put Lawrence into the Lurtz.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
No,
well, I think, but doing that, I think, means what you're talking about. That goes back to the essence of the character. You have to, without the actor playing that part, it is just makeup and rubber and stuff like that. You have to, so you have to put the actor, even though we don't see the actor per se. We see, obviously the prosthetics and those things. You have to put the actor in the statue, because if you don't, it's just the rubber and stuff like that. So yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. And it's interesting that I'll just jump right back to the beginning of ZBrush. That was one of my concerns. And initially it was a well-founded concern, in that because of the nature of ZBrush, you're pushing around a thin veneered surface, right? Today, ZBrush is so sophisticated. I spent an hour on it this morning working on a collectible that one of our team is sculpting, and I was trying to get the nuance in some of the musculature of the lower face. And the ZBrush program has become so sophisticated. You now are able to push around volumes in a manner that allows you to find the person behind the skin that they're wearing, right? And if anyone's listening that is aspiring to become a ZBrush artist or are just beginning to learn, try and my thought to you, because I'm an amateur when it comes to using ZBrush, I don't get the time to really train on it. So I just step up to the Wacom tablet of other people's work and make adjustments to things I think are needed. I'm not sure quite how to say this, but don't think about it as a technical digital art tool. That's obviously what it is, and it's a genius piece of software because of it. Think about your actions through the stylus onto the Wacom into the screen, imbuing your creative essence into the digital mud, right, into the digital medium, so that you aren't just pushing around shapes, right? In reflection of what I was doing this morning, I didn't feel that the sculpture had captured the word I was using with our sculptor was benevolent. Now, benevolence is a very jealous, anger, love, very primary emotions are quite easy to capture. But something that is secondary or even a tertiary emotion or a state of being like benevolence, it's really, really hard to capture. And, it's that smug certainty in your faith that you are so happy and aware that you can project that willingly onto others and trying to catch. And that comes down to a great deal of the way that you might carry your upper eyelids, the way you carry the muscles around the corners of your mouth. It's captured beautifully in carvings that we see of Buddhas that have this calm benevolence to them, right? So try and find within the tool the ability to look beyond the interface, this challenging interface where you're drawing here. You may be working on a Cintiq, but most people are still on Wacoms. You're drawing here, you're looking at it there. Think about yourself actually inside the screen, manipulating the digital medium. And it's a great way to start to transition into that thought process.
Nice. All right, Jim, I know you got more questions.
Well, I could keep going. I love the advice that you're giving. And you're giving it for artists. I'm curious if you have any advice for collectors about adding to their pieces. As I was saying, I need a room like yours because I've reached the point where I have to be pretty selective just to find space for something.
Jim, Jim ordered.
Jim, I'm amazingly selective too today because I literally have run out of shelf space, and collectibles are now on my desk where they can ill afford to be. There's a gremlin there. There's pieces here. There's pieces on my desk. You can see this table just over here is actually supposed to be for an assistant to sit at, but they haven't sat there for 3 years because it's got collectibles on it. And then below my desk, you may be able to just see them down there, are boxes and boxes of collectibles I'm still waiting to find the time to make. So, yeah, if I see something, I have got to, I have deeply regretted not purchasing something at the time because I just argued with myself that I couldn't afford it. And that is a fair argument. And as I was growing up, I was limited in my capability of buying these things, and buying something worth $100 or $1,000 would have had a very significant impact financially at the time. But I deeply, deeply regret today not having bought them. In fact, Peter Jackson used to say to me, you have got to grab it in the moment because you will live to regret it. And if you are a collector, specifically of this art form, and you reflect on pieces you didn't buy, I regret it that I didn't buy them at the time. So whether it's our collectibles or any company's collectibles, treat yourself, no matter how impacting it can be, because another 10 years from now, it will seem trivial at the time to you, even though it was such a big decision at the time. But you have the piece next to you and you have it forever, right? And collectibles are forever. And even if we had a horrendous earthquake that tumbled all of these to the ground, I would take any amount of time required to rebuild them, repaint them, and get them back to perfect again, because these are my treasures. And the reason I want to make them affordable fine art for discerning collectors. And you could argue that the latest piece we've done, the Guahia piece, is not affordable. I understand that for some people. These things are crazy expensive to make, crazy expensive to ship. But compared to buying a bronze or a marble, they still allow people of our capability to own a large amount of beautiful sculpture that means something so emotionally important to us. I don't find that poster art, I don't find that there are certain vinyl records that almost take me to this place, but that requires you to take it out of its sleeve, put it on the record player, and it is a single connection through your hearing. What I find with these, and I know I'm sounding a little bit obsessive and a little bit nerdy, but I
the right place.
We share your obsession.
Yeah, I pick them up, I turn them, I touch them. I don't just leave them languishing on the shelf. I actually enjoy them, and each day, a day wouldn't go past that I actually don't select something out of my office or off someone else's desk, because of course our team here have some of them have amazing things on their desk that they've collected that I don't own, that I love to hold and look at and appreciate the art in them, just like going to a fine art gallery and enjoying the art there.
You've given me tremendous ammunition to use with my wife, so thank you very much.
Jim bought Guahir, by the way. He bought something.
Well done. Well done, Jim. I think I don't mean that was a good investment with respect to its resale value. I think that's a good investment from why I would buy gua
Wow.
here, in that it will sit somewhere in your general life and give you back a significantly greater amount than what it ultimately cost, because every single day of every year of the rest of your life, you will have it in your space. And that's why I surround myself. Just right, I just point this out, just right here, right?
Yeah.
Here, and now I'll pick it up. The thing that sits right in front of me is this. And this is a bronze that I actually own. And my wife gave me this on, I think on our 40th year together. And this is by Gilbert Bay. And this is a maquette from a period of sculpture called English New School, which was the Romanticist period of sculpture through the Victorian age. And it's my favorite period of sculpture. And I have this, and I have this sculpture here, which is the Great March, which is a Chinese sculpture by a mentor of mine, Professor Zhao. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. I have these two pieces of sculpture, specifically the first one I showed you, that sits right in front of me every day of my life. And I touch it, I rub it, I enjoy it, I pick it up, I turn it, I look at it, I find a spiritual connection with it. And that's why these objects of beauty are so important. It's why people have always collected totems of art dating back to the very beginning of humanity.
Right. Well, I told Daniel this when he was on with us, I think the first time. One of the things with my collection is when I walk in, not only do I get to have, feel that, of what the characters meant to me, as far as like when I saw them on not just reading the books, but see them in the movies and everything, but there's also emotional stuff. So like when the films were coming out, that was something me and my mom went to for those 3 years. Every year, that was our thing, to go see. We went and saw Fellowship, went and saw Two Towers, went and saw Return of the King. We did all 3 Hobbit films. That was our thing. So when I go and look at those, I don't have just the love and appreciation for the story, the characters, and the beautiful artwork that's been done by you guys, but I also have forever, as you said, when my mom is gone, I will have those memories. I'm gonna try not to cry here on the podcast. I promise I won't. But I will always have those memories of us doing that for those time periods. And so it's not just a collectible. Like you said, there's emotional things tied to it, spiritual things tied to it, that it's not just a collectible of a character. There's more to it than that.
It's funny that you should use that connection of words. Mother, gone, when she's gone, and collectible, right? I will once again just pick up the camera. This collectible here, which is a vinyl of Spike from Rick Baker's Gremlins, painted by Steve Wang. He's actually sculpted the base of it because he came and visited me. On the base here is a picture of my mother, who did pass 15 years ago. One of I was great friends with my mum, and this collectible is actually very important to me. It was the most money I'd ever spent on anything on myself at the time I bought it. For the first 3 or 4 months, I didn't even glue it together. I just had the raw vinyl parts, untrimmed, out of the box, lying on the lounge floor of where we were living. And I would just sit amongst them each evening and pretend fit them together, smell them, look at them, study the incredible sculpture in them, because it was a plasticine pull out of the original mold that was then given to the vinyl company in Japan. I've forgotten the name of them. I actually became friends with the owner of the company, but I've forgotten the name, unfortunately. And I found that by snail mail at a Manchester Trader Mart, all the way from New Zealand. But I sit the picture of my mother holding my daughter at the base of that collectible because of a connection of memory between when I got it and my mum coming and visiting, and how important those connections are. So I couldn't agree with you more. The movie that you watch is a quick or slowly fading memory until you go back into the cinema or pull it out of the DVD case to watch it again. The collectible is a permanent reminder of an emotional feeling that you had at that moment of watching the film. And that is a really beautiful component of what our fandom is about.
Well, I'll say too, Richard, it's not only about the film. It's also about the original material that Professor Tolkien was doing. So when you talked about the challenges of portraying good as strong versus evil as strong, same challenge that Tolkien had. Or when I think about your Salvation at Mount Doom piece, and the eagles are coming, and the weightlessness that you tried to portray into that piece, and also the moment of the piece of what Tolkien labeled as eucatastrophe. So all of those things were bleeding through the films because they were in the original material too. And I really am thankful that your work and those of your teams reflect some of those very same, the essences of what's there in the books.
Yeah, thank you. I chose, because when we first started talking, you guys kindly introduced this as Peter Jackson's version of the writings of Tolkien. I've sort of kept referring back to the films, but you know, as if Daniel was on the call, or you all know Daniel, of course, either by reputation or in person. Daniel is an amazingly astute at keeping the lineage back to the written word. We did it on the film, where we would highlight out of the book the descriptive of Tolkien, so that as you're sculpting something, it is directly responding to the descriptive on the highlighted words on the page. But Daniel, as a creative, an art director, a storyteller, he is really great at making sure that Tolkien's writing is the intent of Tolkien's writing. You know, that it's lovely that you call out the weightlessness of Gwahia. As you can see, one of the great frustrations of doing collectibles is not being able to suspend things in a vacuum. Now, you could argue, well, there's the magnetic technique of magnetic opposing magnets, which we've played around with a little bit and so on. But you've always got to anchor the flying object to something that is rigid, or, you know, and it's great watching the latest generation of collectibles coming out of China specifically that are based on modern anime, and how ingeniously they are linking object to object to object to object to give the sense of things that have suspension. And with Gwahia, we had to anchor the tail to the rock. But the trick there for Gary was to make it feel like the tail was just brushing across the top of the rock, because the wings are generating the weightlessness caused by the arrest of its movement. But also, some of the most enthusiastic collectors on this podcast may remember a long time ago I talked about the first Sauron that we did, and his cloak is not ruffling, it is not fluttering, it is not being blown, it is roiling. It is roiling because of the heat that is coming off the lava, in the manner that heat roils fabric and causes it to dance and lift and move, the way we see cigarette smoke at the moment it leaves the end of the cigarette, it roils and it has this quality. And we've tried to capture in Gua here the sense of the feathers roiling in that moment of arrest as it comes down, because for one moment it has to almost be totally stationary before it changes its trajectory and continues on. And the digital artist captured that so beautifully, but trying to capture it in, remember the digital art or the animator, let's say, irrelevant whether it's a digital artist, the animator is trying to tell a story from A to Z, where you can go from the moment the creature enters the shot to the moment it leaves the shot. And you're telling it through an arcing span of storytelling, where the apex of that trajectory is the moment of action. And in this case, it's the moment that the claws grab Frodo and Sam. A sculpture, a collectible, is capturing one frame of that hundreds of frames piece of animation or filmmaking, and you're trying to capture all of the elemental qualities that are having an impact on that character on that one frame moment. And that's a very, very critical thing that we try and imbue into the piece as well. And that weightlessness that you call out is trying to find that moment.
Right, and you accomplished something very similar with the Dead Marshes piece as well, with Frodo.
The Dead Marshes piece is a triumph for us, a very sublime triumph because of exactly what you're describing. Frodo, to me, and we toiled on this for months and months, but Frodo feels that he is caught in the eddies of the water, and the sense of descending through the water, and then the beautiful way that Brigitte used the tendrils of cloth and roots to imbue the sense of this or spirituality under the water, because he hasn't just fallen into a pond, right? He's fallen into a body of water that has the spectral corpses in it and has the dead elves in it, and the spirit of all of this loss and heartache and threat and anger and aggression is all caught in that moment. And we're trying to capture that in Frodo as he falls, and the desperation of Sam and Gollum plunging the hand through with earnest. And the duplicity, of course, because is he plunging his hand through to save Frodo, or is he plunging his hand through because Frodo's still got the bloody ring around his neck?
Which is, yeah, indeed.
One of the questions people wanted us to ask was, obviously, you've been doing this, like we talked about, for 20 years. You've done a lot of pieces and stuff. Where do you see things going for what you guys do in making collectibles, let's say over the next 10 years? Like, where do you see things going for you guys as a collectibles company 10 years down? Now, obviously, it's hard to predict the future, but where do you see things going?
Well, and a connected question to that, Richard, is I think you announced that you're taking a sabbatical on the master collection pieces to sort of, I guess you're regrouping your thinking, or so it's connected to that.
We don't want to be we obviously fly or die by our sales. And of course, we want to be putting things out there for people to purchase. Otherwise, we don't have an ongoing business, right, to do this. But we also equally, and maybe more so by our very actions that we've announced, that we don't want to just smash stuff out. We don't want to just put stuff out there, because we think about this very, very hard. We don't make things for the sake of making them. We make them because we feel that it's the right thing to make at that time. And we are doing exactly as you said, Jim. We are bringing the wagons back into the circle. And in fact, the reason I was late to the call and the reason I was out of breath and just run down the road is I actually was having a provocative meeting with our senior creatives in our collectibles division, not around specifically a Lord of the Rings piece, but really around how do we keep our verve as we go into the future and provocatively keep challenging ourselves to give our collectors something that they want and something that's fresh and new and special. And I've been pondering this a lot. And obviously, one of my recreational things to do is to watch unboxing videos of collectibles, and I watch a lot, right? And once I finish my emails in the evening, the thing I do is I go onto Instagram and I find collectibles companies that are showing an unboxing of a new collectible, because the unboxing videos for me is not about the fact that some people watch them because of the thrill of watching the unboxing like Christmas Day. I watch them because an unboxing video gives you an amazing insight into the mechanical nature of how they've thought about connecting everything together and how they're pushing the boundaries of the magnetism in the pieces, the mixed media, the lighting, the size of the base, etc. So there's a huge technical value in watching unboxing videos. And I was using the latest stuff that I've been watching. I'd watched an hour solid of this company unboxing their collectibles, and I was using that as a foundation of this meeting I was just having with our team. This is hedging around answering your question. In a perfect world, we get to continue to make the type of collectibles we love making, which aren't extrovert. They're not crazy, exploding this and flying that, and as we're seeing a lot of collectibles today. We love making these sublime, single-piece, 6-scale figure pieces that capture the essence of the character. They don't need a large piece of environmental expose to make them work. We hope that there will remain a market for us to be allowed to do that there are collectors in the world that love those type of collectibles enough that we can keep making those. But as you've seen with Guahia, with Lara Croft being attacked by the dinosaurs, the Frodo falling through the water, we also are excited about trying to push the boundaries of manufacturing, because of course you can't. As our work speaks to on film, TV, location-based experience, some of you are aware of the giant hyper-realistic figures that we make. We built 3 8 times life-size hyper-realistic figures for the Dubai Expo. They would stand 16 meters tall if they stood up. They've got a 1.5 kilometers of fabric in their garments. This is insane stuff. So our ability to make a collectible of any complexity, any mixed media, any amount is technically achievable. Getting it replicated at a cost-effective level that makes it a viable thing that you can sell to people, whole nother problem. So you have to be hand in glove in your relationship with the people that are actually taking your master and trying to make it into an affordable piece. So I have a huge desire, and hence the meeting I was just describing that I ran out of, to push our technical, artistic, and I guess spiritual endeavors within the art that we're producing, while finding things that people find appealing, they desire. You know, we're all object fetishists, right? You are, Jim. I can see on around you. I am. Look at my office. The people that are on this podcast are only listening to this because they're a fetishist of objects, right? They have a fetishism for objects, is what I do. And I hope that we can continue to make things that people desire, and desire to the point that they actually want it in their lives with them. And that's our objective going forward. Hopefully long will it last, well beyond 10 years from now. It's such a joyful thing to be involved in that, you know, we see it as a critical part of our future.
Well, I think, and the reason I asked that question is that there's always, I think, some concern from some collectors. And I kind of, I don't necessarily say I'd laugh at it because that's not the right way to put it, but I kind of chuckle because I know how passionate you guys are about doing this stuff, having, you know, had conversations with you and Daniel and Jules and some of you guys at Comic-Con. And, you know, I know how much you guys love doing it. So I always kind of, I guess, internally laugh a little bit like, oh my God, they're going to, I'm like, I don't think they're going to stop unless the world comes crumbling down, so to speak, because of how much you guys love doing this stuff. So I think that will calm a lot of fears, because there's always, like I said, there's always this worry like, well, they've been doing it for basically 20 years. Are they going to want to keep doing it? What's the, you know, and I'm like, they're going to find ways to keep doing it. I mean, Lord of the Rings, the films are, Tolkien's always popular. It's always been popular, you know, since almost the initial jump. And then the films, you know, have been popular for a long time. So it's like, it's not really going anywhere. But I do actually, that makes me think, I do actually have one question for you on, in regards to the popularity. When the first few statues for the original Sideshow Weta line with the, you know, the Balrog and those cave trolls and stuff like that, when those came out, I didn't get into buying them until 2003. So I missed the first couple of years of doing that. So I was coming in right around the time things really started picking up. But from what I've always seen is that when that Gollum DVD came out with the Two Towers extended version, that's kind of seemed like from everything I've ever gathered, where like it just took off. How amazing that Gollum DVD was and how it showed those collectibles. Is that what you guys saw on your end? Because I mean, the rumor is always some of those early pieces didn't take off very well. So even though they were open editions, they were limited. Did that Gollum DVD, is that for when you guys really realized we're about to really dominate and do some stuff over however long we get to do this?
In all honesty, Josh, I've never actually correlated it to the release of the Gollum DVD. You may be right. The people on this podcast that probably know certainly better than I do, I've never had that conversation with anyone here at work or with Dan. I'm actually now reflecting on what you've just said. When we first started making the collectibles, remember we were in a relationship with Sideshow, and it could be argued that we were overly ambitious. We made too many pieces. We were just so because we loved it, surely everyone was going to love it, right? Because we're invested in it, surely everyone will be invested in it. And we did some pretty obscure collectibles in those first couple of years. And they probably didn't sell very well at all. But I just had this blinded belief that if we made them, people were going to buy them because it was so amazing and it was Lord of the Rings, you know. And but because it was only the first film, I don't think that it had really established a sort of a lifelong fan base. That's not to take anything away from the first film. I think maybe the fans of the first film were maybe feeling out this, you know, where the arc of this was going. and is it going to fulfill my Tolkien connection, etc.? That possibly sounds a bit disingenuous towards Peter as the filmmaker. I don't mean that at all. He made a miraculous first film, a second film, and a third film.
Right.
You know, they're all equally as extraordinary. But we didn't see a sharp uptake until the second film came out. And then there was traction. And people, I think, went, wow, we're in for the long haul here. This is something I'm going to be able to watch every Christmas for the rest of my life. The behind the scenes are incredibly fulfilling. Like, it's interesting today, I meet from time to time a number of people I've not met before that are fans of Middle Earth, and they invariably will say, oh, I connected to this through the movies. I so love The Lord of the Rings. I don't watch it anymore, maybe only at Christmas, but the behind the scenes, I still go back to that again and again and again. I still have it playing in my studio while I'm working. I still right? Which is Michael Pellerin. I don't know that he has ever really been acknowledged as playing the part that he has as the author of these incredible behind the scenes, him and his team, for truly what he did, because you could almost argue that the behind the scenes has now run almost in parallel with the films as a mechanism of bringing in new people, keeping people connected, keeping people excited about what was made all that time ago. And I love that. I love that people are still connected to the films through the joy that we all had in making the films. Yeah, long-winded way to answer your question, but I now you've prompted me. I want to go and phone Daniel and ask him what you've just asked me, Josh, because it's a very, very contemplative thought. Yeah.
So that's always been kind of the discussion among collectors that I hang out with, both digitally and in person, whether it's Comic-Con or whatever, that's kind, and it makes sense though, that from what you're talking about, in the first film is beautiful, and that's what hooked people like me, and I had never read the books until I saw the films. And but if you're a fan, you see the first film, it's amazing. It makes sense though. The second film comes out, you realize the second film's amazing. Now you realize, hey, there's something going with this. And that's what happened with me, was that when I had seen, I'm trying to think, when I ordered my first one in December of 2003. So I think, I can't remember if I had seen Return of the King yet or not. I have to find that order piece someplace. But I remember thinking to myself, because I collected sports cards and sports stuff, I had a bunch of that at the time too. I'm like, I wonder if they make collectibles based on this. I would like to, and I remember, obviously on old dial-up back in the day, it seems like, and that brought up, and sure enough, found the statues, ordered LSR, and that was it for me. So I can understand that how you explain that made sense, because it's like you wait to see just how amazing it is. Oh, they do make collectibles about this? Well, yes, thank you. I would like to now have some of those.
Well, yeah. I think the reason that the Jackson films worked for me, where the Bakshi films did not, was the Bakshi was pure fantasy, and it seemed like Peter Jackson filmed The Lord of the Rings as history. And the attention to the detail, Richard, that you and your team gave to weaponry, to costumes, to the bigatures, and so on, were of such meticulous craft that it bore up to close examination, and it bled through the films in a way that I think it's still paying dividends as a collector, because all of that attention to the forms and the materials and the designs are true to this more historic vision. You know, and like Tolkien wrote the books, it was meant to be not another world, it's our world. It's not a galaxy far, far away. It's a prehistory, which is what's vesting it with the kind of weight that you described.
Yeah, that's very lovely of you to say. It probably would be redundant on me to wax on about this subject too greatly, because this has been much touched on in so much literature and so many podcasts and so on. But I've never heard anyone connect Bakshi's work and this as it relates to this subject. I think I've said this before, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but most fantasy filmmaking up until Lord of the Rings has always required one of the actors, one or more of the actors, to stop for a moment during the 1.5 hours, 2 hours of the movie, to break the fourth wall, lean out of the cinema screen and sort of wink at the audience and say, guys, just stick with me, buy into this, I'll get you there in the end, okay? Just stick with me. Just find this crazy shit that I'm doing with my wand and this bonkers stuff that's happening in this elemental world. Just buy into it. Suspend your disbelief. I will get you there in the end, I promise. Lord of the Rings never, ever asks the audience to do that. There is, I use the term here at the workshop with our team, plausible ecologies, right? In fact, just yesterday afternoon, I gave a lecture, a workshop to 16-year-olds from the local high school, and they have designed some wonderful science fiction miniatures, and they wanted a critique and they wanted a lesson for an hour and a half on what we challenge ourselves from a design perspective, a manufacturing perspective. So, and I went to great effort to labor to them this sense of cultural plausibility, of ecological plausibility, of because if you don't have that, you are asking your audience that if it is not fact, if it's not a documentary, it is already begging of the audience to suspend their disbelief because it's not real. It can't be believed because it's not real, but you have to suspend your disbelief to believe it for the period of time you're watching it or reading it, right? And therefore you're already asking the audience to be challenged to do that. The last thing you want, therefore, to do is to put challenge on top of challenge on top of challenge, where the audience go, okay, I know that cars don't really fly, but and there's been no exposition why this car particularly flies, therefore I'm just going to have to buy into, oh, and now the guy inside the car is doing crazy and his head's spinning around and his dog can float, and okay, I've got, oh no, and now he can fire sparks out of his wand. And something that Peter did so extraordinarily well is that at no time did you have to stop while watching the movie and post-analyze what the fantastical elements of it were. And I found that to be so refreshing. We'd worked on Hercules and Xena for 7 years. And that trades a lot on magical magic, right? And but because it's playing to Greek myth and it's entirely appropriate, but because of it, it has to be slightly comedic and fun and just carry you along in this tumbling, good fun ride, which both Hercules and Xena did. Middle-earth couldn't be that because of the sincerity of Tolkien's writing, because of the pithiness of his literature and the fact that he never wrote this as a fantasy world. He wrote it as an alternative piece of history where physics plays the real world equivalent to our own world, where materiality, where gravity, where elemental qualities all are imbued. And as I've said before, people could challenge you on that and say, what about a fell beast? Fell beast, isn't it? But if you look at the fell beast has a wingspan comparatively to its body mass that arguably can keep it in the sky, as opposed to other dragons that we've seen where that arguably isn't feasible.
This is the best thing about having like people on like you. You get to hear these stories and it's just drawn in. It's really amazing. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I don't want.
I do have to wrap up.
I don't want Reed. I don't want Reed to send me an email and be mad.
No, Rhea is actually out this morning. That's why you've got an extra 25 minutes, I think. But I have 5 minutes left before I've got a hard stop at 1:30 to get to another meeting.
I have one final question for you, and it's a fun question. Obviously, years ago, we got the Peter Jackson statue. Are we ever going to get a statue of you? And
God forbid, I hope not. That's the last thing anyone will want. No, I don't believe you'll be getting a statue of me anytime saying, oh my gosh, you've got Peter's statue. That's great.
I do.
We loved making that. That was terrific. You know, if there was a larger fan base of what we make, we of course would release a group of Corsairs. We would release a group of the lead Easterlings. We would release more of the Elven race. But you have to be so aware of what the collectors want. And there will be people on the call right now going, no, we want more Easterlings. But the problem is that's only 8 people, right? So we have to be super thoughtful of that. And we would love to think that we could be making much more bespoke, unique characters. I wish there was a model that would allow us to only need to sell 50 pieces.
Wow.
If there was a model where we could even just break even making 50 pieces, we would then do a great deal more unique characters.
For example, which is I have to ask for my wife. So, but I hear you.
Yeah. What was that, Jim? I missed what you actually said. What was that?
As Josh knows, I'm a huge Samwise collector, which is why I now own all 4 of your Frodo's Journey pieces, because you kept putting Sam in it. So I need.
Yeah, to me, Sean Astin's performance, as I've said on previous podcasts, and Samwise's characterization, to me, is the quintessential performance of those movies. He is our hero. He's the everyman. He's the working man servicing the gaffer. He's the man down the coal mines. He's the woman that's working in the mill. He's the quintessential hardworking, good soul in the world that we need more of today, and he's our hero. And
so now I just need Rosie Cotton to go with him. So
okay, well there's we love Rosie Cotton as well. There's a great example, right? If only there were 500 people in the world that want Rosie Cotton, then we would, of course, do Rosie Cotton, because Rosie Cotton is a beautiful character to do.
I'll start a petition. How's that?
Yeah, please, of course. Anyone on this on this discussion, on this podcast, if there's something that you want, start a a petition and share it with us. Not a petition, you know what I mean? Just start gathering names. We want to make every character within Middle Earth. We want to be doing this in another 20 years.
Oh, I already know one character that a person that's going to watch this is going to start gathering names, because there'll be several of us that want a Denethor statue. So I know that's going to get started. You may get a list from somebody on that.
Denethor comes up in our discussions. It's well, because there's another astounding performance. Talk about a performance where the actor is just bubbling underneath, right? Just this brewing of emotion and self-righteousness and arrogance, and it's just so anyway, we've got lots more to talk about. Hey, thank you very much, Josh and Jim. This is a joy to me. As you on Sunday, I'm actually flying to Auckland because we're holding our first Weta Collectors Clubhouse. In fact,
I saw the Facebook deal for that.
I'm going to show you something. I just had this done by Greg Broadmoor just yesterday. This is the poster.
That's awesome.
See, Weta Collectors Clubhouse.
Nice. And they're done with Dr. Gordon boards too. That's cool.
Yeah, he's the artistic Dr. Gordon boards. And this little character's going, help! And it's going to have cold fusion, collectibles, and arm wrestling. How's that for freaking cool?
That's very, very cool.
That's going to be a
very cool
experience there in Auckland.
Yeah, we're holding it at Unleashed, at the Weta Cave in Unleashed. I think about 120 people have signed up, which is so exciting.
Awesome.
And we are yesterday I shot a video around my office that I'm going to share on Sunday of me talking about my favorite collectibles, and I'm going to put that on first, and then hopefully we'll have a lovely afternoon just nerding out with each other about our love of what we do. So won't that be fun?
That will be
We're heading your way in December, so we can't wait to experience it.
Oh, so what? Sorry, Jim. Did you just say you're coming our way in December?
Yes, we will be in New Zealand. My wife.
Oh, are you planning to come and hang out with us?
I hope so. I know we're planning on being in Wellington for several days.
Well, holy hell, we're going to get to meet you in person. So you must go to Unleashed in Auckland.
We are.
Yep, great. And you must come and hang out with us. Let me show you through the workshop and introduce you to our team.
Okay.
Still got a large number of people here that worked on the original films who would love to meet you. Pity you can't stash Josh in your bag.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. If Kansas City, I'll fly down to you, Jim. Just put me in a bag. You can check me. It's cool. I'm fat. It's all right.
Fair enough. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Bringing a whole group. Celebrate the 20th anniversary of Return of the King.
Good stuff. Well, we look forward to it. We look forward to seeing you very much. Hey, thank you, Josh and Jim, and thank you to everyone who is stuck on this podcast to listen to me somewhat fanatically waffle about our collectibles. My huge thanks to everyone that continues to collect what we do. It allows us to do something so joyous in our lives, and specifically to the people that have just collected the Guahia sculpture. That meant a huge amount to us, seeing that people collect that as enthusiastically as they did. That's been a very big, bold endeavor for us. So we were very pleased that people loved it so much.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to come on and giving us extra time. Please tell Ree I said thank you for letting us have extra time as well.
Ree's now turned up. She's just arrived back after being out for the morning, but she's having lunch, so I'm not allowed to turn the camera
We had a little fun while the the parent of the whole setup was out having a good time. So we stretched things a little longer.
Well, this place is all about when the cat's away, right? The mouse do play. So,
well, thank you very much for coming on. I'll let you get to obviously other very important things going on in your day.
yep.
If it's possible, we would definitely want to have you on again and come and talk more about stuff.
Always love talking to you guys. Thanks for your interest, and my best to everyone.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Bye. Bye-bye.
See you.